Okay. All right, so it is our last day on Robin Hood, and I just want to kind of talk about what's coming up next week, a couple of reminders for you, and then we'll get into it. For Monday, you have very short readings, just a context reading about marriage in the Renaissance, but I do want you to have this book in your hands, ready to go, so that we can practice reading aloud from it and getting to know it a little bit. This play is written in early modern English, which means it's going to be a little old-fashioned and hard to get into, but we'll practice and we'll go over some of the main characters to kind of keep an eye on, and we'll kind of go over some of the key plot points so that you'll be able to sort of follow those along. So we'll be reading that play, The Roaring Girl, for the next 2 weeks. On Monday, I hope to have your papers graded to give back to you. And we'll talk about the next major assignment, which is due March 24th. So we're a little ways away from that, but we'll start getting busy on that. Next week is also a really weird week. You'll remember we have these Wellness Wednesdays. The way next week works is there are no classes on Wednesday, but we treat Tuesday like it's a Wednesday. So I will see you on Monday. I will see you on Tuesday. The whole day runs as if it is a Wednesday. You will do nothing but take care of yourself on Wednesday. You'll have regular Thursday classes. You'll have regular Friday classes. Does that make sense? Okay, it's a little weird. It throws our schedule off, but just try to keep track of that. Okay, so we're going to finish up Robin Hood today. Let's start with Robin Hood and Maid Marian. I'll put the link in the chat if you want to get your notes up and ready. And then we will talk about that one and the death of Robin Hood, and kind of sum up the whole tradition a little bit. Okay, so we haven't seen a lot of women in these tales. What did you think of the story of Robin Hood and Maid Marian? Just general impressions? How does this ballad stand up to some of the others? Georgia, what did you think?
I think it's interesting that it finally brought in a woman. It seems like there hasn't been a woman in any of these yet.
No, and we just get the old woman in one story, but not as a protagonist or nearly, an equal. And then we get Maid Marian, and then we're going to get his cousin in the death story, and that's it. These are not stories that feature female characters for the most part. Other impressions of this? Have anybody seen movies that feature Maid Marian as a romantic lead, whether it's even the Disney version, or one of the others?
I would say that it kind of highlights the misogynistic values of the time, because all of the women that are in the story, they kind of only exist in relation to the men. She's just his love interest, or their cousin,
Yeah.
she doesn't really have her own thing. Even Little John was doing some other stuff before he met Robin Hood, and he had a more developed kind of story.
Yeah, nice point. This would totally fail that Bechdel test. Are there at least two female characters who have a conversation about something other than a man? No, women's experiences are just not centralized in these ballads, in contrast to the tales we read a little earlier. Maid Marian is kind of criticized by the ballad tradition too for just not being very good. And so we can talk about that as well. Caitlin, what are your impressions of the presence of women in these, or Maid Marian more specifically?
I was gonna kind of say the opposite. When they portrayed her fighting with a sword, I thought that was very progressive for the time, because women were supposed to just be in the house and cooking and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, what's funny about the Maid Marian one is, she goes and she acts in disguise, like the men do, and she's doing hand-to-hand combat with Robin, and neither one of them recognize each other, even though they know each other and are sweethearts. But then finally they realize who the other are. So there is potential there, right? And the Uma Thurman film version includes that motif, that element where she dresses in disguise and Robin doesn't recognize her, and they actually kind of run into each other outside. Yeah, what do y'all think? Do you see it Nate's way, where the women don't have a whole lot to do, or do you see Caitlin's point that there's some openings for resistance, even if it's not like pure feminism, at least there's some agency, some action being taken on the part of Maid Marian here?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Caitlin, just that it's like different seeing the woman, because we haven't seen it in any of these. It's normally like the men doing a lot of the devious acts. So it's kind of like cool, not cool, but like nice to see the woman do it.
Ben, where do you land? Oh, go ahead, Carlin. Yeah.
Just like tying into the text, I have a question about one of the lines. In regard to what Nathaniel said, this might be in support of his point. Around line 45, after they duel a little bit, he says, "Oh, hold thy hand," said Robin Hood, "and thou shalt be one of my string." One of the string, like, I feel like that's kind of just sounds like another like notch on the belt type deal.
I hear that. I don't know. I mean, he thinks he's fighting a man. And so I feel like it means like one of my band, one of my team. It is a weird way to say it that we wouldn't say anymore, except in a kind of misogynistic way, like you're saying, like a notch on the belt or a mark in your book or something like that. But the fact that he at that point doesn't know he's fighting a woman, his sweetheart, suggests that this is another one of those Robin meets his match stories where he fights against somebody and he realizes they're really good. I want them on my team. And so that kind of idea could be part of what's going on there. Yeah, thanks for asking. Good question. Any other thoughts on whether we've got kind of, troubling gender here, or like potential for, some interesting takes? Georgia.
I thought it was kind of cool because it like, to me, it felt like it was she was the female version of Robin Hood, which like kind of made it seem like they were a perfect match at that point.
Yeah, she's depicted as his equal in the fight, and so kind of his counterpart. And it does seem to stress this sort of like escape to the Greenwood, and they almost are like king and queen of the springtime, and they kind of like are going to be the the rulers of the band, and it's all about the food and the merriment. Like, it's really thin on plot, right? I mean, she and he know each other, they go off and they run into each other in disguise, and they don't recognize each other in the fight, and then they're reconciled, and then it's all about the celebration. So maybe that's more of the point, the kind of teaming up, matching up. Any other thoughts about this one?
Just another point of like where I've seen her before in some like older movies, it was kind of the relationship between them was kind of like Romeo and Juliet-esque, like they're from opposing sides. And we know that Robin has issues with authority that he makes public. But is she like, she is associated to the royalty in the town, is she not?
Yeah, Marian's a really late addition to the tradition, which is part of why we haven't seen her in any ballads until this one. And the earliest film versions of her make her kind of like the French ruling class party, and make Robin the kind of like original Englishman, the Saxons, the guy who's there before the French nobility come in. And so they are kind of on opposing sides. This is the first time Robin is described as a earl who's somehow become disgraced instead of being primarily an outlaw. So this is a different Robin, where he's sort of a higher social status, if not of those ruling French. And so, yeah, the story definitely gets transformed a lot over time, so that she becomes like the person who gives the reward at the archery contest and things like that in those later versions. Let's move to the prioress in the sad death of Robin Hood story. And the English here was really hard too. So if you have questions about the English and the death of Robin Hood, I want you to ask them. Let me get that in the chat. Okay, so plot summary wise, did you get to do the very short reading about like medieval medicine? It's creepy and funny and weird. Did anyone look at the 4 humors and can tell us about bloodletting?
I could tell you about bloodletting. I don't remember the article exactly, but I do remember that part. They said it was like due to like too much blood in your like veins, and like it was like buildup of like your digestive system like in your veins, so they would like have you basically like bleed out so your veins wouldn't like clog.
Yeah, so they didn't have as full of an understanding of medicine and science as we do, but they believe that there are 4 basic, fluids in your body, and blood being an important one of them, and bile and choleric and another kind of bile. And to get you in balance, a primary medical treatment in the Middle Ages was bleeding people. And so just as today, we can very easily survive donating blood, it's, kind of helps stimulate your immune system in a controlled way. They did that. They just didn't, put it in plastic bags and give it to people. They didn't have that technology. And so they would, use hot knives, sterilized, and cut veins and allow people to bleed. And this would kind of like stimulate their immune system. So there's some small medical basis behind that belief. So Robin seeks out his cousin, who is a prioress, a head of a convent. Holy women were often looked at as figures of medical treatment and medical lore. We don't have like a professional doctor class here. Women often were caregivers and like medical providers. He goes to her to be bled, trusting her to cut him and watch the bleeding. What goes wrong? What did you pick up? Let's just summarize it.
Too much blood cut, or like makes too deep of a cut.
Yeah, she cuts him too deeply on purpose, as it turns out. So look at line 67. Set a chafing dish to the fire, said Dame Prioress, and strip thou up thy sleeve. So Robin Hood gets in place. The narrator comments, I hold him but an unwise man that will no warning believe. So Robin got a kind of prophecy from some old women he encountered when he was going to the convent in the first place. And they sort of said, oh, something bad's going to happen to Robin Hood. And he proceeds forward anyway. Now the prioress takes her action. She laid the blood irons to Robin Hood's vein, alack the more pity, and pierced the vein and let out the blood that full red was to see. And first it bled the thick, thick blood, and afterwards the thin. And well then knew good Robin Hood treason there was within. So, she cut too deeply. She let him bleed out too much. She didn't stop the bleeding. But obviously this is going to make him weak. So he tries to escape. How? What was he going to do to escape? What do we have in line 79 and following?
He tried to he was gonna try to run and he couldn't, so then he blew his horn to get his men.
Good. He's trying to jump out of a window and escape so that he doesn't die there, but he can't. He's too weak. And he remembers his horn, another motif we've seen before, but his blows are very weak. They're not strong because he's on death's door. Little John hears that and knows that something is wrong, and Little John comes to his aid. Look at line 95. What cheer, my master, said Little John. And then Robin answers, in faith, John, little good, my cousin, meaning the prioress, and Red Roger, between them let my blood. We don't hear a lot about this male figure, Red Roger, but he's like the villain as well as the prioress. They've deceived, they've betrayed, they've trapped, they've killed Robin Hood. What can we read between the lines? Like, what do you think's the relationship between the prioress and this Red Roger? Why might they team up?
They might be together.
Yeah, they could be working together. Whether they are romantically involved or not is never really made clear in this ballad. But prioresses are not supposed to have relationships with people like in the outside world. They're obviously not supposed to commit murder. So that's just this tantalizing detail. Most of our villains so far have been, the sheriff, or bishops or figures of authority. For Robin to be betrayed by a woman, his cousin, his kinsman, and who is a prioress, who is this religious figure, is really, really bad. Red Roger gets what he deserves. Let's see. But before then of a shot window, good Robin he could glide. Red Roger with a grounden glaive, a sharpened sword, thrust him through the milk white side. But Robin was light and nimble of foot, and thought to abate Roger's pride. For betwixt his head and shoulders, he made a wound full wide. So they each give each other their death blows. Says, lie there, Red Roger. The dogs they must thee eat. For I have had my last rites, he said, and I may both go and speak. And so then Robin is going to die. What is his last gesture? What is his last act with, Little John as a witness? Let's look at his sort of dying thoughts. What sorts of things does Robin reflect on here? And what kind of a death does he have?
So I believe Little John, he threatens to burn down the entire place, and Robin Hood said no. He's never hurt, a maiden or done these sort of things, and he wishes to remain that way to the end.
Good. Little John's in great pain. He's been loyal to Robin for so long, and they've had this tight relationship. They've had these falling outs, but he basically wants to burn the place down to the ground, the convent down to the ground, because he wants vengeance on the prioress. Robin won't allow that. Robin says, innocents might be harmed as well. If I should do any widow hurt, he says, God would blame me. And so this is a Robin who doesn't hurt the innocent. We have seen him in other ballads be a little more bloodthirsty. Nice point, Rian. What else? What else can we say about this ending and how Robin goes out? Nicole?
Didn't he shoot his arrow for one last time?
Yes. What's the significance of where the arrow lands? Can we build off what Nicole said? Go ahead, Katie.
I think that was.
Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
Go ahead, Katie, and then Rian can tag on.
Wasn't it just where he was supposed to be buried, where his grave was going to be dug?
Yeah. Rian, do you want to read those lines for us? I can read them too. A broad arrow I'll let flee or fly, Robin says, and where this arrow is taken up, there shall my grave dig to be. Lay me a green sod under my head and another at my feet, and lay my bent bow by my side, which was my music sweet, and make my grave of gravel and green, which is most right and meet. He's going to be buried with his bow where that last arrow he ever shot lands. So that defining characteristic of him is how they decide where to bury him, and they obeyed that dying wish. Kind of sad to see him go this way. What do we make of that being his end? All the enemies, all the foes that he went up against at different points in his career. What do you make that this is his ending?
I feel like it's kind of appropriate that he was deceived after he deceived so many other people, but it also still gave him the chance to duel like he so loved to do at the end. So I thought it was kind of an appropriate way to go out, with his right-hand man at his bedside and shooting his bow.
Other thoughts about similar motifs we've seen? The trickery, the trickster being tricked in the end, that is a kind of irony here. Funny that of all the enemies he went up against, it's really by the deceit of a woman that he's brought down at the end. That this wouldn't have happened without her intervention and his misplaced trust in her. Once again, he had signs and warnings and people sort of saying, I got a bad feeling about this, or this is a trap. And he presses on. And normally he's able to get out of that, but not this time. This time, all he can get is a little bit of vengeance by killing Red Roger in return. Any other thoughts on this one?
Did she cut him purposely because of she knew of like his past actions? Was that why? I think I missed that part.
Her motive is really unclear. It doesn't seem like we know exactly why, but you think it might be because of his past actions? That, you know, he was definitely against church figures in the past. Other possible theories for, like, again, the ballad doesn't tell us, so you can't really be wrong about this. Like, what do you think might have motivated her? Any theories, Lauren?
Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of confused about that because like she was also his cousin. So like I don't know. I thought that was kind of weird because like they're family. But I guess like maybe if she was working with Red Roger, like that like influenced her more. But
It raises a lot of questions, but it gives it sort of potential for later adapters or storytellers or movie makers to like create what they think that motive might have been. John Kay, any theories? What might explain why a cousin would turn on their cousin, a prioress would turn on Robin Hood?
I mean, just because her cousin doesn't mean she likes the guy. Like, she could be sick of his stuff, like his stuff he's doing too.
Do we think we're supposed to sympathize with the prioress? Think that she's a good person, that she's doing right and wrong? Sean F., what do you think?
I thought by like, you know, there has like we don't know like the motive or anything, but I don't think we should sympathize with her because she has some reason to have killed him. So I just thought it was funny that like she was his family and he placed trust into a bunch of random people that he'd meet along the way, but then someone that like you should have trust in, like with family, is the people that betrayed him. So
Yeah, I think that's definitely an irony. And I think the fact that a woman plays such a big part in his demise when he's such a, you know, anti-hero or heroic character, you know, being very swashbuckling and swaggery and very masculine up until this point, I think that's also very interesting and important here. Let's take a few minutes and collect some thoughts on the Robin Hood tradition as a whole. I need you guys to get your Brightspace open. I'll share screen and show you where we are there. You might need to refresh. Let's see if it shows. Yes. Okay. So I want us to do this little quick in-class write to kind of sum things up. These are not all of the Robin Hood ballads. There's obviously more we could do with this. It would be great to spend time and watch the entire film versions and a couple different ones and compare and contrast them. But you've now had a little bit of a taste of the medieval Robin Hood ballad tradition, and I want to hear your impressions of these. So you can answer questions like this and just type this straight into Brightspace. What's been most surprising about these Robin Hood ballads? What was the most appealing to you? And then what was the most strange or sort of unexpected, right? So these are sort of like some concluding thoughts about what you appreciated and what was kind of challenging about these. Let's take about, we've got 5 or 10 minutes. We can take some time with that. Let's do that first. Then we're going to take a few notes, kind of like to remind ourselves of what happened in what ballads, with a handout that I posted a revised version of today, because I realized I had an old draft posted before that I directed you all to. So I'll show you where to find that. And then we'll finish by watching just one final video clip. So let's take about 5 or 10 minutes to think on this in-class write, and then we'll come back. let's take another minute or two to wrap up your thoughts, taking stock of the Robin Hood ballads. Okay, I just want to hear from a couple folks. I look forward to reading these. Can I maybe hear from you, Rachel, and you, Jillian, and then we'll see who else feels like sharing. Just, what were your overall thoughts of reading these? What was surprising? What was interesting? What was challenging?
So I probably sound naive because I hadn't heard much of Robin Hood at all when I was growing up. So I just said that I was very surprised at how violent they were because I had known that it was like a Disney thing had made a video. So I like did not think it would be violent. I thought it was interesting that that it was like I liked that it was the plot that the outlaw kind of got away with it, because like you always root for the underdog. And what was the last one? It was hold on.
No, that's a great start. A couple other people wrote very similar things about like not knowing a whole lot about this tradition. And I think it is something that, there's like children's storybooks. And yes, you might be familiar with the Disney version. These are very clean version. The violence surprised Ben a lot also. And Katie, do y'all want to comment on that?
Sure. I was pretty familiar with Robin Hood as a kid, but not like what we read. Like it just, even like the later stuff wasn't as violent, but just the early ones like were brutal. I don't know. It caught me off guard when I read the first one and he was just like murdering people.
Yeah, it's one thing where he's like going after the sheriff because the sheriff is abusing people. And you're like, okay, so the sheriff dies, that he has a sense of justice. There's a code, there's a reason for the violence. But he just like goes off after the villagers, the people in the town, and he like kills 12 of them, and like with no warning. It's kind of shocking. Jillian, what were your impressions?
I said that I was most appealing to me was that how like loyal they were. Like I said that I feel like they were such outlaws and you wouldn't like expect them to have those characteristics, but like they almost treated each other like brothers. Like it didn't matter how many arguments they got in or disagreements, like they still were always there for each other. And then that also was kind of like the strangest thing for me too, because like that just doesn't seem like that would happen. And then for what was the other one? It was interesting,
surprising, disturbing, any of those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I said.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that a big part of the appeal of these is that deep-seated loyalty, and it is like a sibling relationship, like a brotherhood, where you disagree and you bicker and you fight and you have fallings out, but then you make up, like when you can really count on each other in the end. So I find that very human and very appealing. Anybody else want to weigh in? What you think is interesting about these?
So this is the first time I have read anything or like interacted with any literature where Robin Hood dies. And I would think based on other medieval literature that we've read, it would have been from a jealous lover of perhaps Maid Marian. So I was a little shocked that it didn't have anything to do with like that powerful theme of jealousy that we've read through a lot recently.
Nice point. And this may be our only sad ending, to be honest. Like I very purposely tried to pick things, that had playful, happy, silly, themes. But that moment where Robin Hood dies in such a traitorous way is very different. And from what I like that you're trying to connect it to other things we've read and kind of how it picks up on or contradicts those themes. Anybody else want to weigh in? Liam, what did you like or find strange or find interesting about these?
The only thing that I found most surprising about these ballads was Robin Hood's character in regards to his personality.
He didn't behave the way that you thought he would behave?
In a way, like I once heard from a video that a hero's duty was to inspire greatness into others. And with someone like him giving to the poor, one would normally expect him to live up to that role, right?
But
when
he's
reading,
very flawed, isn't he? Yeah.
yeah, he's what could be summarized as overconfident for me.
Yeah, he's got a lot of swagger, and that kind of is a flaw sometimes that
Yep.
is very unappealing to a lot of us. I love how, obviously at Springfield College, we talk a lot about leadership. I love how you all are thinking critically about different forms of leadership and the strengths and the weaknesses of the kind of leadership that he embodies.
Yep. Then there's also the enemies he's made throughout the ballads.
Yes, some deserved, some maybe not so much.
Yep.
On paper too, we'll have an opportunity to kind of revisit Robin. And so because of that, I want us to be able to kind of be able to find things when we need to and reread selectively. So this new version of the handout, I apologize that I posted an unrevised version. I had worked on it over the break and the right one didn't get loaded up. But this one breaks it down by the days that we read things. This one is posted in the announcements section of Brightspace. Robin Hood and the Monk, Robin Hood and Guy of Gisborne, and Robin Hood's Progress to Nottingham. These were all of the really violent ones. So if you're thinking about themes, you could include that note. If you're thinking about, themes like who his antagonist is, this one has some of those. This first one has some of those anti-clericism themes where he is against a religious figure. Robin Hood's Progress to Nottingham, he uses his bow and so forth. So, if it helps, if you're really interested in particular characters, you can I'm not going to collect this handout, but you could use this to sort of take notes on characters that really appeal to you. Our second day on Robin Hood, we looked at Robin Hood and Little John and Robin Hood and the Friar. These are both stories that were about Robin Hood meeting his match, it's often called in the ballad tradition. He goes up against an opponent, he loses the conflict, but ultimately he sort of seems to come to a understanding with them. And so we have some of his followers named, and we have that major plot point of a physical conflict, fighting with a staff here, his sense of fair play, fighting over a crossing of a body of water there. On Monday, we looked at Robin Hood's Golden Prize, Robin Hood and the Bishop. Those were the two where he sort of took on religious authorities and called out their hypocrisy and their lies. And we started to see the development of kind of Robin Hood's own code. So again, you could sort of put some of those themes down to help you keep these distinct from some of the others that have similar names and similar plots. Wednesday, we saw Robin Hood and the Golden Arrow, his love of disguises, his need for people to know he was the best, and his trick shooting, his delivering a message through an arrow. Robin Hood rescues the three young men, and Robin Hood and Alan a Dale, two of the only places where you've seen him actually get involved to help people. And so, that's that more generous Robin who kind of has his own code. And then the ones that we read for today, where we see some female characters and we see, that sort of pride that leads to his downfall, as well as the symbolism of his arrow in choosing his funeral space, the use of disguises in Robin Hood and Maid Marian, and so forth. So that's kind of what I hope that document could be for you, a place to just kind of jot down ideas so that when you get the paper assignment, okay, I want to reread this ballad, or it makes sense for me to focus on that. This can be very informal. I'm not collecting this handout, but I would recommend it as just a way to kind of organize your thoughts, if that makes sense. Sound okay? Okay. So we have time to watch one of the final scenes of the old 1930s version. And it is a duel between Robin and Guy of Gisborne. Robin has to rescue Maid Marian because she figures prominently in this as the love interest. And so he is going head to head with the sheriff and Bad King John. And there's some bow, trickery and great shooting earlier in the movie, but it really comes down to a duel. And the cinematography here is amazing. The swords, you can tell, are like flimsy, bad, like not real. And so like the fight choreography might feel a little cheesy to you. But the cinematography, the framing of shots, the use of shadow in this hand-to-hand fight, and the way that the score, the music really kind of emphasizes the action, makes it really fun, over-the-top, family-friendly entertainment. So we want to watch this short clip, and then I want to hear your reactions to this very triumphant bit of Robin. So I'm going to share my screen with you and share my sound with you. And here we go.
Did I upset your plans? You've come to Nottingham once too often. When this is over, my friend, there'll be no need for me to come again. Your sword, Gisborne. You know any prayers, my friend? I'll say one for you.
All right, impressions of that scene.
It was pretty intense, the fighting.
Yeah, I mean, I like how they build, right? Robin has the upper hand. Robin is at a disadvantage. They're grapple close to, hand to hand. He almost gets, stabbed by the guy's dagger. Pretty intense. Other reactions? Liam, go ahead.
Well, I guess I found another surprising trait about Robin Hood, specifically about that scene where he handed his opponent his sword when he fell down the stairs.
Yeah, he did. he doesn't take the advantage. He wants a fair fight. He's not going to just stab somebody in the back.
Yep. That honestly reminded me of one of those bits from Star Wars. Like, you heard about those movies, like how the Jedi consider it wrong to kill an unarmed being.
Yes, and George Lucas definitely saw this film a lot of times, right? So the duels between the Jedi are using a lot of the same sort of sword play. And when you see the shadows cast against the tower, he stole that image 100%, you know, for some of his films. He was trying to imitate and call back this great scene. So everything from George Lucas to Princess Bride, right, has been inspired by this duel. Other observations, things you noticed, things that you appreciated?
I like how they took it out of the like massive like fighting area where everyone else was fighting, and they were just like in this one random part of like what seemed like a castle.
Yeah, so Robin's men are all grappling with, you know, the other forces in the big area, but it becomes this, you know, leader against leader, man to man. And so, you know, that is sort of like a microcosm of this bigger battle between the forces of evil and the forces of good, symbolized by Robin.
It seemed like Robin could have bested him at any time. He chose, or at least the director chose, to have him slay what's his name again?
That was Guy. In this version,
Guy.
Sir Guy. Yeah.
Slay the guy right after he tried to pull a dagger on him and use a little trickery there. And Robin was like, "Okay, I've given you enough chances. Now it is time for you to go."
Yeah. I mean, he did have the better of Robin under the candelabra thing that fell on Robin. You know, do you know any prayers? I'll say one for you, right? And I do like that they spar with their words as much as with their swords. Like being witty, quick thinking is a large part of the tradition that these movie versions enjoy embracing too. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed our work through Robin Hood. Our next work, very different, but we have a feisty, exciting character in Moll, the title character of the Roaring Girl, who cross-dresses, smokes tobacco, and is completely uninterested in being married. And so we will see a very interesting central female character in our next work after not having a whole lot of female characters in these ballad traditions. And we won't have too many wicked wives. We will have some cheating wives to kind of recall to some of our previous texts we've read. But you're going to see a few happier marriages and relationships, which is something to look forward to in the next couple of weeks when we read. So thank y'all. Have a great weekend, and I will see you next week. You don't have writing for Monday. Your options for homework next week are Tuesday or Friday of next week. Okay? Get your copy of The Roaring Girl in hand. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.